We're getting a good crowd here, so I'm sure we'll have a few more folks join us in the next couple minutes, but we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so welcome everyone. I'm Dr. Liz Rutledge, Director of Wildlife Resources at the North Carolina Wildlife Federation. Thank you for attending tonight's webinar, which is part of the 15 webinar series, Learn to Deer Hunt. The series offers a dynamic lineup of presentations and materials curated by the New Hill Hunter Education and Mentoring Program, covering a wide variety of topics to guide new deer hunters from preseason scouting to processing. The series is hosted and moderated by the North Carolina Wildlife Federation in conjunction with its South Wake Conservationist chapter. All right, so I'll take a couple minutes to provide some background on NCWF programming related to R3, which is retention, recruitment, and reactivation. The Federation has partnered with NC State, the Wildlife Resources Commission, Wake County Wildlife Club, and other conservation groups to build upon current R3 programming and introduce college students from non-traditional backgrounds to hunting and shooting sports through academics afield. We also do Getting Started Outdoors, which is a partnership between the Wildlife Federation and the Wildlife Resources Commission. We provide an all-day educational workshop and one-on-one deer hunting mentoring opportunities for participants. For those interested in wildlife and conservation policy issues, the Wildlife Federation has the CAMO Coalition, which is a listserv to keep members up to date on policies specifically geared toward hunters and anglers, and that is free if you'd like to sign up. Artemis is a program of the National Wildlife Federation that the North Carolina Wildlife Federation promotes to uplift women in sporting and conservation, to provide small group hunting and mentoring opportunities for females. And the Wildlife Federation is proud to host this webinar series in conjunction with the New Hill Education and Mentoring Program and additional partners who are contributing the educational content for the webinars that we're able to bring to you. In addition, Wildlife Federation volunteers Guy and Judy Gardner partner with the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission to provide skills-based seminars consisting of Deer Hunting 101 and From Field to Freezer deer processing. These are open to the public and are usually in September, so please consider registering for those. And the Wildlife Federation works directly with North Carolina Hunters for the Hungry to facilitate the donation of hunter-harvested deer to feed the hungry across the state. All right, the seminar series was curated by the New Hill Education and Mentoring Program and the facilitating partners listed on the slide. The webinars are for adults new to deer hunting and includes practical topics to explore the ins and outs of hunting and enhance your overall outdoor experience. Please see the New Hill Education and Mentoring Program Facebook page for more information and field opportunities. And I'm happy to introduce guest speaker tonight, Evan, and he's the co-founder of Opportunity Outdoors. So I think you guys have gotten a chance to meet Evan and Andy in past webinars. So we're very happy to have him here with us this evening. And a little bit about Evan. Since he was just learning to walk, Evan was exposed to the great outdoors. Hailing from rural upstate New York, his family has always taken advantage of the opportunity to harvest game from the land. That upbringing left Evan wanting to share the wonders of wildlands with more and more curious people. From indoctrinating to teaching himself to archery hunt for bull elk in the Rocky Mountains, Evan lives to push the boundaries in the outdoors. So I will turn it over to Evan right now to introduce tonight's webinar.
Thank you again for having me. This, I think, is the third one that I've been on so far, and I really enjoyed doing these. And you know, thank you to the North Carolina Wildlife Federation for hosting these on their platform. And you know, to New Hill, I can't talk enough good things about New Hill. You know, ever since I've started working with Judy and Guy and all the other mentors and mentees, it's just a fantastic program for people to get involved and learn how to hunt and get serious about it so they can build some confidence. So yeah, thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to this webinar. A little bit about Opportunity Outdoors for those who are new or haven't heard about us before or don't know much about us. Our mission statement is basically to grow conservation in the outdoor community through mentorship. And what we mean by that is we are advocates and we look to assist with newer hunters to try and find a mentor community. I have taken a lot of the slides out, so if you go back and watch the previous webinars, we talk more in depth about us. And I can give you some more information on how to reach out to us and get in contact with us, whether that be on social media, email, phone, whatever way works for you guys. So and girls. So this is what we do. This is what we enjoy to do, is stuff like this, and then also hopefully getting more hands-on experience for folks in your area. So today's webinar is going to be developing a hunting plan. So I'm going to try and cover what I typically do and how I approach each hunt each time and how I try and plan for the next hunt. And I think this is one of the barriers that can be a little bit daunting for a new hunter, especially someone who maybe is unsure about maybe how to approach a standard, doesn't know what, you don't know what you don't know. And this is kind of my methodology on how I prepare for my hunts and how I actually help some of my mentees get in positions to hopefully up the odds of getting a deer, getting an opportunity at a deer, especially on somewhere like public land where, there's no baiting and there's some specific regulations and there's a lot of pressure. It can be challenging. So to plan your hunt is very valuable, and to plan it effectively will give you a much higher odds of being able to fill that tag. So I like to say the most successful hunters create a recipe for maximizing their odds. It doesn't mean you're going to get one every single time. What you're really looking to do is try to up your percentages on when you see deer and getting the opportunity to get them. And each hunt can have a little bit different ingredients, but the goal is always the same, and that is just to fill that tag. But there's a lot that goes into that. So, every recipe has different steps to it and different measurements and different ways of doing it, and you can always change it up and create something very similar or almost the same just by doing it a different way. So I like to say, insanity, is doing the same thing over and over again. It's an Einstein quote. And, if you do something once and it works, maybe you should try it again and see if you've figured out some kind of pattern or something that maybe will work somewhere else as well. But if you do something over and over again and you're getting really bad results, then maybe you need to switch it up. And that goes for time of year, the time of day, the weather. There are so many variables that can change. So being able to pay attention is really important. So the agenda for the hunting plan today is understanding the land, checking the weather, scouting download, as in looking at what you've scouted, what you figured out, where you found pins, where you found trails, where you found funnels, food, etc., bedding, and then the post-hunt download, or creating the hunting plan from that, a post-hunt download. So if you've gone out hunting and you've picked up some certain kind of information that you didn't get when you're scouting preseason, then those hunts are just as valuable to download and figure out what happened during that hunt so you can plan for the next hunt. And then I'll have final thoughts and then, of course, questions. So I think it's super important to understand where you're hunting, whether you've been on that ground or not yet. I think people need to really look at the land and what is on it. And the most valuable times are when you get your boots on the ground and really scout an area and take a lot of time to just learn it. Just walking a piece of property alone, whether you think you're finding sign or you don't know, or you don't understand, is going to help tenfold later down the line when you're actually doing your hunts, because you can see maybe where animals are moving to and from, and you notice something different in an area because you've seen it and you understand it, and then you kind of can put puzzle pieces together that really might down the line help you, maybe not even this year, but next year or in the year after. The more and more you understand a place that you're hunting, the better you're off, because you can start to understand the animals that inhabit it. So what is the terrain like? I always consider, what is the terrain like? Am I in the mountains of Western North Carolina? Am I in the Rocky Mountains, in the dry area close to Utah? Am I more towards the Continental Divide? Am I all the way out on the East Coast here in the Croatan National Forest where you got the longleaf pines? What does the contour look like? And then have I found deer trails there yet? Do I anticipate maybe where there could be some deer trails due to a topographic feature, something that's a barrier for animals where a funnel might happen? Have I looked at the different kind of food that might be there, looking on a aerial map and picking out where the pine trees are versus where an oak tree might be, where the creek is, where something gets more water to produce more acorns, or maybe where there's fields, maybe there's farmer fields nearby, maybe there's strategically placed Wildlife Resource Commission food plots, maybe, trying to understand kind of all the different pieces with terrain and the forage that's there and the foliage. So, and then there's also the deer bedding areas. What's the thickest, nastiest stuff? What's hard to get to? Where does it seem like when you walk in, all of a sudden the deer comes busting out and you never saw them? Trying to understand those parts of the land is really important. And then how many people hunt this area? Where do they hunt from? Are they all always parking from one trailhead? Are they parking on the side of the road? Is there one guy who's got a spot on this part of the property, but he never really goes to that side of the property? Trying to see maybe where there's less people and where you can capitalize on the fact that those people might be pushing animals to different areas of the land, and understanding maybe they're only going in a mile, maybe they're going in real far. Who knows? They could be overlooking an area versus not wanting to take the time to go farther in. And then what time of the year are you hunting? Are you hunting early season during archery? The pre-rut? Are you in the middle of it, right at the start of gun here in the central zone or wherever else that you live? Or are you in the post-rut phase after the rut's over and deer are starting to hunker down more and getting ready for the winter? All of these pieces are moving all the time. But if you can kind of take this as a checklist and say, yeah, I understand the terrain. I think I know where some deer trails are that are being used. I know where the food is right now. It's in the acorns. I'm pretty positive there's some really strong bedding in this cutover that happened a couple of years ago and it's grown up. Is the hunting pressure typically happens from the west and the east side, but there's not as much coming from the north because it's harder to get to. And then I'm hunting the rut. So all of those pieces together could give you an idea of, okay, this is the area that maybe, I could go after. So I always check the weather really hard. It's one of the most important parts of hunting for me, and I think most successful hunters pay in-depth attention to what's going on in the weather. Is there all of a sudden going to be a cold snap tomorrow and you're going out and it's going to be really cold in the morning and it's going to get deer on their feet? Or is it a warm, rainy, windy day and, not as many guys are going to be out there, and hey, that during the rut, anything can happen, or even pre-rut. And heck, if there's less people out there, then that means the deer might be moving. So always pay attention to wind direction. That is number one for me, because that dictates how I walk a piece of property. If the wind is going one direction one day, but the next day it all of a sudden switches, that changes how you approach your area. So understanding wind is huge because that helps you set up on a trail. It dictates maybe what place you're going to hunt, what stand you're going to hunt, because sometimes the wind just isn't good to get to an area because your wind's going to blow straight into the bedding area and you're going to bust out deer that you might have had an opportunity to hunt if you didn't spook them out and came in a different way. So understanding wind is huge. So I always check the wind. And I don't take it for exactly what it says, but it gives me a general direction on where the wind's going to come from. Temperature relative to the year. So if it's a hot spell, deer might not be moving as much. They might be moving at night. But if it's all of a sudden a cold snap and it's October and it starts hitting close to 30s, well, that's a great time to get out. Or it's starting to warm back up, or something's going on. Like, all those things kind of dictate some of the ideas on, again, where I'm going to hunt and when I'm going to hunt. The moon phase. So the moon phase could be, a full moon during the rut and it's a clear day. That means that deer, they can see better at night, and they might be running around all night. So being out there really early in the morning, trying to catch them early before they go hunker down or go to feed or something else, or maybe they've been feeding all night in the moon. But if it's a cloudy night and it's not a good moon phase and it's a new moon, then the deer might be moving much more during those twilight hours because they can see better. They like that time frame where they can, see better, a little bit better, but it's not full sun and it's not full, so moon phase is important. Some people trigger that off of how the rut's going is on the moon phase. I think it has a lot to do with how the animals are moving and how active they are because of what's going on with the light at night. Precipitation, cloud cover, wind, I kind of touched on that. Is it an extremely windy day or is it a really calm day? Is the wind just going to kind of be swirling? Are there major gusts happening with periods of downtime? Is there going to be a big rainstorm coming up at 10 o'clock in the morning and this pressure system is moving through? Is it really cloudy? Is it, the sun burning down? All these things I pay attention to. And then in the past and future forecast, what happened yesterday? Was there a big storm that came through yesterday in September, or some tropical system that came through that really made everybody hunker down? And then all of a sudden, are the deer going to get up in 2 days and get on it because they got to eat and it's in the rut, and that's when you want to get out there? Or is it right before a storm system? Because just like all animals, they kind of sense when something's going to happen. They know the pressure system changes. They understand, the outdoors probably better than we do. They don't have a weatherman telling them what's going on. They use their instincts to tell them when they need to get moving and when they need to hunker down. So all checking the weather is huge for me every time I go out. Scouting download. I've maybe checked some areas. I've got trail cameras out. I've looked for the forage. I've looked for the food. I find where the acorns and the hard masses as we get into the fall. I know where those areas seem to be frequented because either past seasons that I've hunted or I'm scouting a new area and I'm noticing some really good food, or I'm noticing some travel corridors or some funnels and some old buck sign from maybe the year before when I've been scouting it in the late winter, early spring. So I always like to figure out, is the sign fresh? Where was it fresh? And when was it fresh? So if I found fresh sign in August, that might not be the same fresh sign that you're going to find in, September, October, November. But it might be, you don't know. So you have to go through and kind of pick and choose and say, yeah, there's always been fresh sign in this area come October. Okay, well, that's somewhere to really think about if you're hunting in October, and vice versa. If it's somewhere that's not really getting frequented during October, but it is in September, well, then, you usually pick your spot to hunt there in September, and then you move to a different spot maybe in October. Where have you seen deer exactly and when? So it's super important to remember if you've been walking somewhere and you bust a deer out, or if you actually saw a deer walking a trail, or you were hunting somewhere and you've seen deer, remember what time of the year it was, remember the weather, remember what phase of the rut it was, all of these things that are going on. Try to remember when it was and what time of the day it was. Do you know the deer trails? Do you know the system of trails that some of these deer are traveling on? Have you gone out and scouted, found a deer trail and walked it and kind of marked spots on it and said, there's 2 or 3 deer trails that intersect here. That's a great spot to have a stand because my odds just went up. I'm a big deer trail hunter. That's kind of how I've always operated. I don't hunt over food a lot, especially on public land, because they tend to be nocturnal or they're feeding on private. And I really like the funnel stuff, and I don't like to bust deer out of bed. So I like to try and intercept them in those early mornings and evenings. And you can even get them during the day, during the rut, as they're cruising around looking for does that have traveled on these trails hours before. So I really like to know all the deer trails, and that's how I grew up hunting. That's how my father taught me, and it's come to be true for all my hunting seasons. And then what do you have on trail cam pictures? Are you getting pictures of deer in certain areas during certain times of the year, or are you not? Just because you don't get a picture doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just gives you a process of elimination maybe for that time of the year. And then is there new food sources coming up? Is there new crops growing in a different piece of property somewhere right next door? Is there new acorns dropping? Are the white oaks dropping? Are the red oaks dropping? Is there some kind of other browse that's coming up, trying to understand where there's going to be things that are going to be popping up and when they pop up, because deer will hone in on that and capitalize. And you could capitalize on it as well if you understand the land. And has the landscape changed at all? Have you been hunting a piece of property that's been owned by the state and then all of a sudden they clear cut it and it used to be a really thick bedding area? Well, that's going to change the way the deer behave. So how do you know where has it changed? What has changed? Maybe some crops were planted this year that weren't there the year before. That's huge. That's really important information that you can use. So creating a hunting plan. This is the strategy that I follow when I create a hunting plan. So typically I've taken into consideration all the things that I just talked about in those previous slides. I know the land, I've taken my scouting information, and I know the weather. So I'm going to pick a desired target location. I've gotten good sign in here at this time of the year, or I believe I will have good sign there based off of past seasons. So this is the area that I plan to hunt because there's 3 trails that intersect between a bedding and a feed area. And there's also, it's pre-rut, so the bucks might be on their feet a little bit more traveling these trails. Okay. So then I'm also going to keep safety in mind. What way am I going to be pointing my firearm? Am I going to be pointing it, in a bad direction? Well, I don't want to be sitting, I want to make sure I'm safe at all times. And then I want to know where other hunters possibly could be. I have a history of maybe some guys will come in from this direction or that direction, and just being conscious of, knowing your surroundings. And then I consider the best approach based off of the weather. So if the wind's blowing a certain direction, I want to walk with the wind in my face, whether that be in the middle of the day when deer are down, or maybe in the, early in the morning when it's still dark and deer aren't in that area, or I'm anticipating them to come into that area because they've been feeding and they're going to go to the bedding. So I always consider my best approach. And then I always, double check my bag, make sure I have everything that I need to hunt and nothing more. I don't like bringing extra stuff that I don't need, especially on public land where I'm typically hunting deeper areas or I have to switch tactics, and go somewhere else. I usually stick to one kind of strategy that I'm going to hunt with, whether that be on the ground. Well, I'm not going to bring my stand. I'm going to stick to hunting on the ground. Or if I'm going to go hunt a stand, like a climber or a harness, I might be bringing, those essential items. So I always make sure that I bring everything I need and nothing more, so I'm not carrying extra stuff. Sometimes I'll pack stuff in my vehicle just in case I get an animal, or I decide midday that I want to go hunt somewhere else and do a different strategy. But usually I think about what I plan to do it and put everything in there. I always let my fiance and even a friend who I hunt with know where I'm going to be. Giving away your spot is not worth, being lost in the woods with a broken leg or something like that. So make sure you let somebody know where you're going to be, how long you plan to be there, if they don't hear from you. And that's super important to me, every hunting plan. So that way, if something happens, someone knows where I'm at, especially if my phone dies, etc. So I then run through the entire scenario in my head. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to park at this area, and I'm going to go into this spot. I usually run it back from what time do I want to be sitting in my stand? Okay, an hour before sunrise, which means it takes 15 minutes to walk in. So I need to get there 45 minutes before sunrise. Okay, well, or an hour and 15 minutes before sunrise. And then I keep backtracking to how long does it take to drive there? How long is it going to take me to wake up and get everything ready? So that way, okay, all right, that's the plan. That's how I'm going to get there. And I think about the path that I'm going to take to get in there, or I perceive I'm going to take to get in there. Maybe I've never hunted there before or taken that route, but I play through it and then I play up how I'm going to get into my stand, where I'm going to be sitting, and what I'm going to be anticipating. Because once I run through this scenario, I start to build confidence in it and I start envisioning what could happen. And to me, having confidence in a scenario and a hunt each time you do it keeps you alert and keeps you ready and keeps you excited. And it maximizes your potential to be ready when something good happens. And then I always create a hunt plan B and sometimes even C, especially when I'm hunting public land, because some guy you've never met before could, or woman you've never met before could have the same exact plan that you do, or something very similar that would throw yours off. So, okay, what's plan B? If you have a couple plans in your head, then you will never have to worry about going out, planning a day of hunting and feeling like your day got ruined. And your plan B might be better than your plan A, you just didn't know. So I always have it and I always use it. I don't always use it, but I always have it ready to use. So now I'm just going to go into a quick little demonstration about me using a map that I've scouted in a similar areas to where I hunt. This is nowhere anybody can hunt. It's actually a state park. So don't go and try and find this area and go hunt it because you're not allowed to. But it's something that I can use to demonstrate what I'm trying to show. So if I can, I'm going to have to stop sharing this. And I need to switch to camera off. And here we go. So, alrighty. So this is a piece of property that I've kind of mocked up the way that I typically look at a piece of property. A lot of my onX looks like this, and what I mean by that is all of these pins, the color coordination, you know, the way I set stuff up with areas. This is how I use onX, and this can be applied to any kind of system that you want to use, whether that be another, you know, just using Google Maps, using paper maps, etc. Typically, I use yellow for pre-made trails, maybe four-wheeler trails, roads, and I use dotted lines for different, like walking versus, you know, being able to drive on it would be a solid line, and I put creeks, etc., etc. But here I'm going to kind of explain a little bit about what's going on. So in the bottom right corner, it tells you that the wind would be going to the north at 8 miles per hour right now. And the temperature is 84 because it's summertime. But you'd be able to tell me a little bit of information on what's going on. So this is a great spot to come in and approach from the north because the wind's going to be in my face, and anything that's down here in this area is not going to smell me as I walk in. I've scouted this area, so I've walked these yellow lines and I've walked these other dotted lines, so I kind of know ways to access the property through parking over here or parking up there, and I know other potential places where people could be coming in and out. And I've picked out areas that have some food in it, so like the oaks over here, and when you find these areas, you can change the name of them, like the small oak bottom or the southwest oaks, or however you want to remember things, so that way you can think about ways, you know, it kind of just gives you a way of coding what your system is, and that's just how I do it. But so plan A, I'm going to come up with plan A. It's going to be about, you know, pre-rut season, so late October, mid-October, and, you know, there's going to be some deer moving around. I'm going to go archery hunting, so I'm looking to get close to some trails. It's going to probably be a little bit thicker, and I want to get into some funneled areas that I've scouted out. So I'm going to probably park my truck at one of these two areas. It looks like based off of the wind, I might park here, up here in this area, and have a little bit of a longer walk. And I'm going to come in the morning really early, and I'm going to take this trail down. I've decided I'm going to take this trail down, cross this little creek bottom over here, get up to this high point, and I'm going to pass this, what I consider a bedding area. But because it's more closer to the access points, I might not be as concerned as it being maybe a little bit more in the middle of the archery season. Maybe deer have been busted out of there a lot, and they're holding tighter to these deeper areas. So based off of the information that I've seen lately, there's some water out here. There's been some guys maybe hunting in this area. So I'm going to go all the way out, and I'm going to decide between maybe one of these two spots. But based off of the wind and how everything's traveling right now going to the north, there's a trail that runs right to the north of this. So this spot really, to me, isn't the spot I want to sit, because if a deer comes, you know, traveling from this food area to here, or from this food area to there, going to a bedding area over here, or maybe to the north, or even over here, then they're going to smell me. So what I've decided to do is I'm going to go even a little bit farther south, and I'm going to go and set up right here on this stand area that I had picked out. And it's between two bedding areas and a food source. Plus there's a couple fields over here. and there's a pond with a creek. And I like this area because it's got a bench here, and there's a trail that comes from this area that allows deer to kind of travel back this way as a quick escape either way. But they can travel into here, and there's a nice tight area close to this bedding area that I can set up on, and I can intercept animals, and I can see across this creekway a little bit. And as you can see from the foliage, it's a little bit lighter, but it's close to some tighter cover. So the deer can kind of hang out on that fringe environment where the thicker pines meet the more open pines, and then it goes into some hardwoods over here. So I kind of get the best of like 3 worlds going on over here. And I really like areas like that because it gives me a high maximum chance of possibly intercepting deers that are traveling through here. Now, if something were to happen, or I decided that, you know, this was my morning plan and I wanted to go somewhere else in the afternoon, well, then my other plan could be to backtrack my trail, come back, and go down over to this area. Because maybe some deer have been hanging out in the bedding area here midday, and for the afternoon, maybe they want to travel back through this area. There's been some less pressure to travel over through this ridge and these creeks. And this allows me to intercept them from the other side of this field, which on public land, they typically don't hang out in fields for too long or at all. So if I can get on the edge of this, they're going to hang out in this fringe area where the creek comes up, and I have this trail that cuts down through the bottom in these thick pines, and I still have the wind in my favor for the most part, unless something came from the north. But I'm anticipating that by midday, maybe somebody had pushed some deer farther into the property, and I can go back over here and sit there. And maybe I'm hunting with a buddy and he goes and sits there and I go sit over here, and maybe we send a third person over there. And then we have this whole bottom area covered. So any deer that get pushed towards the lake and travel through these travel corridors will be potentially intercepted by us. Those are the ways that I basically plan a hunt. I'm thinking about the way that I'm coming in and where I'm setting up. Now, if there's a bunch of vehicles parked over here, or there's a couple vehicles parked over here, it's a long ways to go down in here, so I might not be as concerned as them stealing my spot, and I might actually walk past them in the morning. But if it looks like, I maybe talk to a guy who's going to plan and do the same kind of similar thing, well, then maybe I'll park down here or over here and go to my plan B spot, which is right here. And I have a trail that comes from this open flat area, or not open flat area, but piney flat area with some potential bedding down in here. And I found a trail that they kind of run over here, and maybe I'm hoping that if I see that guy up there and he plans to go deep in here, he's going to push a deer straight across over to my way. So that would be my plan B, is sitting at this brown blind. And that's, in a nutshell, that's basically how I'm approaching these hunts every single time. And if it works the first time and I'm seeing a lot of deer action, I might do it a couple times again. But if I'm not seeing much, maybe I'll switch it up to something else, or I'll take and when I take my midday walk to switch to a different spot, maybe I'll pick up some signs somewhere. Maybe I'll find a new trail that's been used heavily down near this pond or something, and I can take that information and use it for the next time. And I can pick out a tree and say, oh, I could sit up in this stand, or I could sit down in this ground blind over by this field, etc. So it's kind of how I approach these areas. I segment them into feeding areas. I segment them into fields. I put in the thicker stuff where I've noticed, I've identified some bedding areas. I've looked at some trails that I can walk in on, and some roads that currently are already there that people use a lot in parking areas. So, and then I also like to put markers on creeks that maybe aren't as easily seen, because that gives me the opportunity to walk these creeks and see if there's some fresh deer tracks on them, and lets me kind of understand where the deer are traveling from and what direction they're headed. So that's really how I approach a lot of hunts, even from rifle to bow, is exactly what I just explained. But if I go back to stop sharing that, I can switch back to the PowerPoint. So that is the basic demonstration on how I use OnX, and it's there's a lot of tools in Onyx that you can use, like the areas and changing the colors of pins and using different pins and labeling them. That's really how I set up a lot of the properties that I hunt and scout. So after the hunt, there's a lot of downloading that goes on where I think about the hunt a lot. I think about what happened, whether I was successful or I wasn't, what sign did I see, why did something happen good or why did something that happen bad? And then maybe the wind, busted a deer out from behind me and it's blowing and it's snorting and it's running away and I just read the wind wrong or I read the trail wrong, or I didn't realize there was another trail behind me. Maybe I discovered something new. Maybe I found some new forage. Maybe I found where there's a new cut that someone did or somebody logged. What's going on that I found? Why? Maybe I found a nice new rub trail, a scrape. Were there other hunters nearby? Where were they? Where did I notice that they were parked? Where did I notice maybe I ran into them in the field? So I kind of try and figure all that stuff out. And then successful or not, what are the details that happened if you did see a deer? So where'd you see them? What way they were traveling? How were they acting? Was he kind of acting like he was in the rut, or was it a doe that was just feeding? Was it, a deer that was running? Maybe he got spooked by somebody, or you. What would you do differently and the same next time? So would you do the same kind of setup with a different approach, or would you do a completely different, setup with the same approach? Just trying to think through maybe what you can learn from each hunt. I also, I converse with a lot of hunters, whether they're new or old or et cetera. And I look on forums and I look on Facebook groups and I try to see maybe what other hunters are seeing in their area. I'm not looking for their spot. I'm trying to find people in the same kind of areas that I'm at and try to understand maybe what some of the deer behavior they're seeing. Maybe they're noticing some more deer being in the acorns and there's been a lot of acorns dropping, or maybe they've been seeing, way more deer starting to rut already and it's early or it's late. And I like to share my similarities and differences on what I've been seeing. And sometimes one piece of property 30 minutes from another is acting completely different. But you can know that most of the deer are kind of doing similar things within that kind of radius. And I also will talk strategies with guys, what has been working for them, what hasn't been working for them, what ways have they been doing differently than me, or et cetera, or vice versa. And then I always take note of all the little and big details. Was somebody, hunting on the ground very close to the edge of a lake because all the deer have just been continually being pushed out there? Or is somebody hunting deep into a pine thicket because they're getting in close on some bedded bucks? Or, kind of coming up with different ideas that maybe I could apply to my hunts, or I don't want to apply to my hunts, but just understanding maybe what each other is doing and what's working and what's not. Then I'm always pondering those new strategies, new locations for my future hunts. And it's kind of what I just touched on is, you reflect on your hunt. Do you think about the next one? Would you do the same tactic, something different? And then I go back, I look at my map, I look at the whole picture, I look at different areas, or maybe I look at a different piece of property and think maybe I'll go hunt there the next time to decrease the pressure on that area. And maybe this one has more of the things that people are noticing deer are going to right now at this time of the year than another piece of property that I hunt. Being super flexible and kind of being creative with your next hunt can help, but sometimes if you're doing something that's working in the moment, it's something that you should try to get back to as soon as possible. And then I also do a lot of research, from other successful hunters online or, in different areas that, tend to share a lot of their information. And then my final thoughts, basically for creating a hunt plan, because I want to be able to answer a lot of questions, and I think that'll help, is never stop asking why. So like, why did this happen? Why did that happen? I know most of my webinars, I keep talking about asking why, but it's still, I think, applicable to everything in hunting and in life, even in general, is why did this happen? Why did that happen? How can I make that happen again? Or how can I help make sure that doesn't happen again? I like researching and talking with, I have mentors, and I have other hunters and people that I lean on when I feel frustrated or I'm trying to figure out something that maybe someone else is doing better at than me. I keep a positive attitude when I think about the next one. It's like, man, I didn't get it this time, but next one is going to be this much better because, I think I got a better idea. And then maybe I'm thinking, you know what, it didn't work this time, but I was close, or I think I'm going to be very close coming soon. And then I be persistent. Like, you can't shoot them on the couch. It's an old saying. It's kind of a joke at this point, but it's true. Like, you gotta keep going out, keep being persistent, try new things, try different things, try the same thing. I listened to a podcast today about a guy who does the same tactic because he knows it works. He said he'll sit in the same stand 7 days in a row because he knows it's going to work, because sometimes deer are on patterns that they don't come for almost a week. He just knows that his opportunity is going to happen, and when he gets his opportunity, he's going to execute because he knows it's going to work because it's worked in the past. And then lower the pressure on yourself. Like, every time you go out, don't expect to, always be like, I'm definitely punching the tag, definitely punching the tag today. Like, it's got to happen today, or I'm not going hunting anymore because I'm not good at this. Like, lower the pressure on yourself. It's about getting out and hunting and having fun and learning, and that's why I like sometimes to hunt with friends or a mentor, or, new hunters or different people, because I like the social aspect of it. I like the camaraderie of it. I like being able to root somebody else on, and at the same time they're rooting me on, and it kind of gives you maybe that extra little jolt that you need to keep going out. And yeah, finally, have fun. Like, this is supposed to be the planning of the hunts and going out and trying something, and maybe it works. Great. That's what you want. But if it doesn't, it still can be a lot of fun. You can see a lot of action the more you're out there, and the more you're out there, the better you're going to get at it. So, as for Opportunity Outdoors, you can find us at www.opportunityoutdoors.com, and you can always email us at connect@opportunityoutdoors.com. There's also a phone number that you can reach us. Just let us know who you are, what you're looking for in terms of some guidance. Maybe a lot of our stuff happens here in the Triangle area of Raleigh, but we're really trying to start expanding here soon. We're only about a year old, and we have a lot of things going on that are hands-on experience, like our archery school, and then we also have more webinar stuff going on different topics like waterfowl hunting, archery hunting specifically, and we anticipate some other opportunities in some different areas, whether that be fishing or hunting. And our end goal is to really connect you guys with some more conservation organizations like North Carolina Wildlife Federation, other New Hill similarity pieces, and yeah, we're just really here to help and build a community of mentors that can help you as well. And then hopefully one day those who are new to hunting can also mentor as well. So that's really what we're fostering and what we are developing here. And we're only seeing it expand, and we're really excited about it. So please reach out to us if you are looking to find more opportunities in the outdoors. And then I'm going to move on to questions, Liz. So I guess if you wanted to field those.
Yeah, so we'll move into questions.
I also put up a slide here that kind of, if people have questions or don't know if they have questions, I just, put up a bullet points of questions you can ask me, and they can be as specific or as general as you like.
How about we'll just have folks jump in there. If anybody's got a question, just raise your hand or unmute yourself. And I'll go ahead and ask a question real quickly. You were talking about other videos, waterfowl hunting, things like that. Can we find those on the Opportunity Outdoors website?
Yeah, so we actually, most of those posts have been on social media lately. We just announced that the other day, so I'll have to put on some buttons so that way people can click on them and register. But any of our social medias have those links to it, but I will put those up, and I can also have the link sent out after this webinar for other opportunities that we are providing here in the near future.
Nice, very good. All right, any hands raised? Let me check the chat box real quick. I don't think I've seen anything. Nothing in the chat box yet. We'll give you guys just a minute or two in case you do have a question.
You got one hand.
All right, Michael, go ahead.
Hey, Evan, thanks for doing this. Question for you on like proximity and like maybe like the or the acreage that you kind of look at when you're making these plans, and like maybe you do find a good bedding site, but there's no water or food sources around. Like, what kind of proximity are you looking for those things?
So it really depends on the piece of property. You know, if it's one of the only water sources in the area, like what's different about different properties, especially when you get into different parts of the state or country, is the way that the land is, and that's why I talk about it. But somewhere like here in the Triangle or in most of North Carolina, water is something that is not shy, whether that, you know, so I'm not as super concerned about, you know, water being super close because it probably already is. As you saw from that picture, there's so many creeks, so many lakes, so much water that I don't concern about that. But I do start to think about where the bedding areas are relative to where A, access points are, where people are going to come in and out a lot. B, where they are to some kind of food source. And if I can find that happy, you know, an area that is harder to get to for people, but it's kind of near food within like a mile or so of walking distance for a deer and to their bedding, that two combination right there, 1-2 punch, is kind of my idea of saying, okay, there's got to be some trails here that they take from this bedding to food, but it's also away from people, and they've probably been pushed there as time goes on during the hunting season. So I'm looking for something within a relative, like 1 square mile is what a lot of hunters talk about, is something where they, you know, if water is an issue, they have water, they have food, and they have bedding within a 1 square mile area. And if you can figure out where those bedding areas are, where the food is, and possibly water if it's needed, then in that 1 square mile, that could be a really good area to check out. Or you're already hunting that area and you can kind of strategically pick where you want to hunt within that 1 square mile. Because most bigger bucks, especially if you're trying to go after them, they kind of keep a little tighter until the rut, and then they could travel out of the county if they, you know, if nature calls. But that's kind of what I'm looking at, is like 1 square mile, like sections, and then I'll even hone down a little bit even more if I found a really good spot where bedding and food are really, you know, within a decent distance from each other. That's not too far away.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, other questions?
Hey, Evan, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Doing well. It's Robert.
Hey, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Hey, I came in a little late, but did you talk about what type of tool you're going to be using when you're hunting? SK, like bow, recurve bow, and kind of like the proximity to your hunt plan with that?
No, I didn't touch on that. I kind of left that up for questions like here. So that's a great question, because I hunt different types of firearms different ways. So when I'm hunting archery equipment, especially my bows, I don't hunt traditional, I hunt compound, and I do have a crossbow. I'm looking for tight funnel areas that force deer into a tight space as they pass through something, whether that be some kind of contour, maybe it's just built up really thick and like just even difficult for deer to walk through areas. Because, you know, during normal behavior where you're going to get an opportunity with archery equipment, they're not going to go busting through that stuff. They're going to try and take a path that maybe cuts through it or cuts right around it. So I'm looking to get into that tight spot with my archery equipment. I also grew up hunting with shotguns, and I use the same tactic pretty much. I've tried and find those tight funnels with crossing paths that maybe take 2 or 3 deer trails that are spread out and force them into one tighter area. So that way I have more of an ethical and better opportunity to see those deer and take a shot at them. Now, sometimes The flip side is that you're not, they could come at any moment and they're just there. But if I was rifle hunting and I position people in rifle hunts where, I like to give people a much farther shot because they can shoot farther. So you might be on the edge of some hardwoods that are open and you can almost shoot all the way to the other side, obviously on the bottom where you can safely take a shot and there's some thicket down lower and then you can still take a shot in different directions. And that actually happened this past year. We had a newer hunter set up on a spot where the contour of the land really dipped down nice, but it went into this creek bottom and the deer seemed to like to travel the edge of that creek bottom, and he could take, a 250-yard shot, whether there's a deer all the way at the creek or he's at the bottom of that hill, but he could see everything and he could see when the deer were coming and he could plan, get his shot ready with his more effective and farther range. When I'm muzzleloader hunting, I'm still kind of trying to get tight. Out here in the east, it's a lot of getting tight because it's just so thick, especially on public land. But if you're hunting private land, nice fields with rifles are great. I've even hunted fields with bows, but I'm hunting the trails that go into them. So I'm really looking to get tight and close, and seeing deer is an awesome way to understand where they're coming from. So if you're bow hunting and you can see kind of farther away too, and you notice something where they're walking on the edge of some fringe habitat on the other side of a bottom, well, then maybe next time you set up over there. But yeah, I'm typically trying to get as close, like within 20 yards of a trail with my bow, but with a gun, I could be anywhere from 60 to 100, 120. It just depends on the area and the spot and what makes sense.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
All right, anybody else, just feel free to unmute and ask away.
Hey, I got one more for you, Evan.
Sure.
As far as like spooking a deer while you're out there, would that be a case where you wouldn't see that deer there again, or will they have to get kicked up a couple times before they leave that area?
It probably depends on the time of day and the scenario and the deer. So if you're in the middle, if it's really low light, like you're coming in early in the morning or late at night and you kick up a deer, they tend to act a little differently because they're not expecting you and they don't really understand. But if you're in like the middle of the day and you kick up a big old buck in the middle of his bedding area, he might move to a whole different, little area, or he might use it, but he might use it more nocturnally. They're more pressure sensitive. But if you continually kick up a deer, whether you know it or not, then the herd or themselves kind of pick up on the fact that this just isn't a safe area. But as for kicking up a deer once, even twice, I mean, that's not uncommon for them, especially on public land. It just might affect the time of day that they travel more than them just completely leaving. But once the rut comes around and they're just so focused on one thing, they might get spooked a little bit, but they're more just so focused on what they're trying to accomplish in the moment that they don't really, they might run away, but they kind of go right back to doing their same thing. I listened to a podcast actually today where a guy talked about someone who bumped a really big deer and they saw that deer 2 days later in the same general area. Most guys consider the fact that some deer don't use the same exact bedding this every day, but they use that same area in a similar way. So just because they get bumped once or twice from somebody doesn't mean that they won't completely leave. And I found that to be very true. And they have patterns. They like one area in the early season and they like another area during the rut, and then they maybe they go back to their early season spot because they just feel it's super safe. So I think that's where scouting and just experiencing hunting comes in, into those factors is, what do deer do when they get scared? There's always escape routes. And people, especially during gun season, will key in on the escape routes alone. And they'll sit till all day on opener, hoping the guys who leave at 10 o'clock spook deer to them because they know they're going to run away to this area because they've scared deer that way. And some guys strategically push deer to their friends because they know deer are going to run that way. But as for them leaving completely, I think that's tough. Sometimes bucks do it, but does for the most part will kind of keep frequenting an area and just kind of keep going.
Thanks again.
Yep.
All right. Any final questions? All right. Well, we'll go ahead and go to the closing slides then real quick. Let's see. All right. Special thanks to New Hill Education and Mentoring Program and all facilitating partners. Watch for a post-webinar email with a link for all materials related to this evening's webinar and a registration link for our next webinar in the series, which is July 27th, and it will be on backcountry hunting. If you have further questions or would like more information on outdoor opportunities, please contact the New Hill Education and Mentoring Program at the link or Facebook page provided. Also check out ncwf.org to learn more about the Wildlife Federation and to join a local chapter. And so thank you so much this evening for the presentation, Evan, and thank you all for joining us. And so with that, we will say good night.
Yeah, thank you. And if anybody ever has more questions on these subjects, or, as the season goes on, they want to reach out and ask, some specific questions on what's going on, I'm always ears, because I'm like learning from other people and what they're seeing, and I'm happy to help in any way. It's probably my favorite part of hunting outside of using my bow is like planning these hunts. I get a lot of enjoyment out of trying to figure these things out. So, or trying to pretend like I know what I'm doing. Sometimes it works, not all the time, not most of the time, but thank you guys again for having me, and thank you for the questions, and look forward to doing the next one in 2 weeks on backcountry hunting.
All right, thank you, and we will see you in 2 weeks, Evan.
All righty, see ya.